At 37 years old, Xavier felt he had finally grasped the shape of happiness. It was not a grand, soaring thing like the Sandia Mountains that cut a jagged line against the Albuquerque sky, but something quieter, more personal, built piece by piece like the solar arrays he installed for a living. His salary at Solar Now was a solid $61,214 a year. Not enough for the sprawling Adobe estates in the foothills, but more than enough for the life he and his wife Jordana had built in their modest $220,000 home in the Northeast Heights. It was a life of quiet routines, shared dreams, and the comfortable weight of a decade-long marriage. That night, at 8:52 p.m., the shape of that happiness was a crisp, white envelope resting on the worn oak of their dining table. Inside were 2 round-trip tickets to Liberia, Costa Rica, and a confirmation for a 7-night stay at an all-inclusive eco-lodge. The total cost, a staggering $8,450, had taken him 18 months of side jobs and overtime shifts to save. It was for their 10th anniversary, a surprise meant to wash away the weariness he sometimes saw in Jordana's eyes, a gesture so grand it would remind her of the man he was, the man who would move the earth for her. He had pictured her reaction 1,000 times, the initial shock, the tears of joy, the way her hand would come to her mouth before she threw her arms around his neck. He adjusted the envelope, turning it, so the light from the $80 overhead fixture caught it just so. He was a man who dealt in angles and sunlight, and he wanted this moment to be perfect. From the living room, he could hear the low murmur of Jordana's voice. She was on the phone with her sister, Adira. He smiled. He'd wait until she was done. The surprise could hold for another 10 minutes. He ran a hand over his short, neat locks, the calluses on his palms scraping softly against his hair. His heart beat a steady, happy rhythm against his ribs, a rhythm he would soon learn was dangerously out of sync with the reality of his world. Their life was a carefully curated collection of modest successes. The $220,000 house on a quiet street off Juan Tabo Boulevard was their biggest victory, secured after 5 years of diligent saving when Xavier's income was barely $45,000. It was a standard 3-bedroom tract home, but they had poured their weekends into it. He remembered the Saturday they spent installing the $1,200 laminate flooring themselves, their laughter echoing in the empty rooms. He'd bought the materials with a bonus from a big commercial installation. Jordana had chosen the color, a light driftwood gray she'd seen in a magazine. "It'll make the space feel bigger, X," she'd said, her eyes alight with the possibility of it all. They'd spent another $100 on pizza and beer to get them through the 2-day project. He'd refinished the dining room table himself, a $75 find from a thrift store on Central Avenue. He had spent hours stripping the old varnish, sanding the solid oak until it was smooth as glass, and staining it a deep, warm brown that matched the cabinets they'd repainted. The total cost for sandpaper, stain, and polyurethane was less than $40. When he was done, Jordana had run her hand over the surface. "It's beautiful," she'd whispered, and in that moment, Xavier had felt richer than any man who could have walked into a showroom and paid $3,000 for a new one. Their dinners were eaten at that table, simple meals cooked from a weekly grocery budget of about $120 from the local Smiths. Xavier did most of the cooking. He found a rhythm in chopping vegetables, a satisfaction in building a sauce from scratch. He'd make her favorite green chili chicken enchiladas, using his grandmother's recipe, a dish that cost less than $20 to make but tasted like a celebration. Their mismatched couches in the living room were a testament to their history. The larger one, a plush, comfortable sectional, was a $600 floor model they'd haggled for at a local furniture outlet. The smaller love seat was a hand-me-down from Jordana's parents, its floral pattern a relic of a different decade. Xavier had always meant to get it reupholstered, but the quotes had always come in around $900, a sum that always seemed better allocated to their savings or a necessary car repair. Jordana called it their vintage piece. Xavier's world was tangible, practical. His 2015 Ford F-150, with 112,487 miles on the odometer, was paid off, its bed scratched and dented from hauling ladders, and his $1,200 set of DeWalt tools. His work boots were a pair of $180 Red Wings he'd had resoled twice. He believed in things that lasted, in the value of maintenance and care. This belief extended to his marriage. He saw it as the most important structure he'd ever helped build. He fixed the leaky faucet under the kitchen sink, a simple $25 repair that saved them a plumber's fee. He mowed the lawn every Saturday, the roar of the $250 Craftsman mower a familiar suburban song. He packed her lunch on the days she worked as a part-time receptionist at a dental office, a job that added about $19,000 a year to their household income. These were not chores, they were acts of service, the quiet language of his love. He thought she understood this. He thought the foundation they had built together, plank by plank, dollar by dollar, was strong enough to withstand anything. He had no idea it was a facade, a carefully maintained set piece for a play in which he was the only actor who didn't know his lines. He saw a shared life built on an $80,000 combined income. She saw a holding pattern. What do you think Xavier should have done differently in his marriage? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's discuss how we can sometimes miss the signs that are right in front of us. And now let's get back to the story and see how Xavier's world begins to crumble. The cracks had been there for years, but Xavier, with his builder's optimism, had treated them as cosmetic. He'd spackled over them with effort and affection, believing the underlying structure was sound. Now, in the terrible clarity that was coming, he saw them not as cracks, but as fault lines, deep and irreparable. The cruelty hadn't been sudden. It had been a slow, escalating campaign of 1,000 tiny cuts, each one delivered with a smile that made him question his own perceptions. There was the time, 2 years ago, when he'd received the Installer of the Year award at Solar Now. It came with a polished plaque and a $1,000 bonus. He came home beaming, his deep brown skin flushed with pride, the plaque wrapped carefully in a towel on the passenger seat of his truck. He'd imagined them celebrating, maybe going out for a nice steak dinner at Vernon's Hidden Valley Steakhouse, a place they could only afford on the rarest of occasions, where a single steak could cost $75. He found Jordana in the living room, flipping through a glossy magazine. Her sister Adira was with her, perched on their hand-me-down love seat like a hawk in a sparrow's nest. Adira, with her law degree she rarely used, and her trust fund-supported life in a sleek $600,000 Nob Hill condo, always seemed to fill their modest home with an air of condescending judgment. "Hey, babe, guess what?" Xavier had said, holding up the plaque. Jordana glanced up, her eyes flicking from the plaque to his face, and back again. "Oh, that's nice, honey." Her tone was flat, distracted. Adira, however, leaned forward, a thin, sharp smile on her face. "Installer of the Year?" She'd read aloud, her voice dripping with a saccharine poison. "How lovely. Do they give out a Tool Belt of the Year award, too?" She laughed, a short, brittle sound. "Jordana, isn't that just precious?" Jordana had offered a weak smile, a silent complicity that stung more than Adira's overt mockery. "Adira, be nice." But there was no force behind her words. Xavier felt the pride drain out of him, replaced by a familiar, dull ache. "It came with a $1,000 bonus," he'd said, a desperate attempt to legitimize his achievement in their eyes. $1,000, Adira repeated slowly, as if tasting a foreign word. "Well, that's a start. You could almost buy that Burberry trench coat you were looking at, Jordana. The one for $2,400. She turned to her sister, completely dismissing Xavier. The two of them were in their own world, a world of price tags and status symbols that he could never seem to afford entry to. The plaque ended up in a drawer in his home office, and the $1,000 bonus went to pay off a credit card balance that had ballooned after Jordana had insisted on buying a $700 designer handbag she swore was an investment piece. Then there were the comments about his job. They were never direct attacks, always couched as jokes or concerns. At a dinner party at Adira's condo, one of her friends, a man who managed a hedge fund, had asked Xavier what he did. Before Xavier could answer, Jordana jumped in. "He climbs around on people's roofs," she'd said with a tinkling laugh. "He's very handy." The word handy was delivered with the same tone one might use for a beloved but simple-minded pet. The hedge fund manager had given Xavier a pitying look and immediately turned away. Xavier had spent the rest of the evening by the panoramic window, staring at the distant lights of the city, feeling like he was a million miles away from everyone in that room, including his own wife. Adira was the conductor of this orchestra of passive aggression. She spoke of Xavier's $61,214 salary as if it were a pittance, a number to be pitied. "My God, Jordana, I don't know how you survive," she'd say over brunch at the Grove Cafe, where a single avocado toast cost $15. "You deserve so much more. You deserve a man who can give you the world, not just a discount on your electric bill." Jordana would sigh, stirring her $6 latte, and nod slowly, letting her sister's toxic words sink in. The most painful memory, the one that surfaced now with a new and horrifying context, was from their last anniversary. Xavier had saved for months to buy her a delicate gold necklace with a small diamond chip. It had cost him $850, a significant sum from his personal savings account, which rarely held more than a couple of $1,000s. He had presented it to her over a homemade dinner at their refinished oak table. She had opened the small velvet box. "Oh," she'd said. It was a single hollow syllable that landed in the space between them like a stone. "It's very simple." "I thought you'd like it," he'd said, his voice small. "It's from Garcia's, on the plaza." "I know," she'd replied, not looking at him. Adira's husband just bought her a tennis bracelet. From Tiffany's. It was probably, I don't know, $10,000? Maybe 12? She had closed the box and set it aside, next to her plate of cooling food. She never wore the necklace. He saw the box weeks later, tucked away in the back of her jewelry armoire, behind cheaper, trendier pieces she'd bought for herself from fast fashion websites. Each of these moments was a stone she had placed on his back. He had carried them, believing it was his duty as a husband to bear the weight of her unhappiness, to work harder, to save more, to eventually become the man she seemed to want. He never considered that the man she wanted was simply not him, and that she and her sister were not just disappointed, but actively, cruelly planning his obsolescence. The outrage was not a sudden fire. It was the dawning, sickening realization that he had been living in a house that was scheduled for demolition, and he was the only one who didn't know. He had been trying to patch the walls while they were secretly selling the copper pipes for scrap. It was 9:03 p.m. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint, tinny sound of Jordana's voice drifting from the master bedroom. Xavier stood in the hallway, a narrow space separating the open-plan living area from their private quarters. The white envelope with the $8,450 trip to Costa Rica felt heavy in his hand. A passport to a paradise he was about to learn was a mirage. He had been on his way to the bedroom to surprise her, his heart full. But he stopped, his hand on the door jamb, when he heard Adira's name. "Adira, I don't know if I can do it," Jordana was saying. Her voice was a low whisper, but in the stillness of the house, every word was crystal clear. He's been so sweet lately. He keeps smiling at me like he's got some big secret. Xavier froze. A cold dread, slick and oily, began to seep into his veins, chilling him from the inside out. This was not the tone of a casual chat. This was the tone of conspiracy. He heard the clink of ice against glass. Jordana must have poured herself a glass of the $12 bottle of Sauvignon Blanc they kept for weeknights. What do you mean you can't do it? Adira's voice, sharp and impatient, crackled through the phone's speaker, audible even from the hallway. Have you lost your nerve? We have a plan, Jordana, a solid plan. But the timing feels cruel, Jordana said, her voice wavering. The trip is for our anniversary. It feels wrong to go and then just end it. The trip. Xavier's blood turned to ice. She knew. How could she know? He had been so careful. He'd used his personal credit card. A Capital One card from an account she didn't have access to, and had all the confirmations sent to his work email. Wrong? Adira scoffed. The sound was like tearing metal. What's wrong is you wasting your 30s on a man who thinks a $1,000 bonus is a life-changing event. What's wrong is you living in that sad little house while I'm... Look, the timing is perfect. It's the entire point. Xavier leaned his shoulder against the cool drywall, the texture of it grounding him as the world tilted on its axis. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. He could only listen. I just feel guilty, Jordana murmured. Oh, stop feeling guilty, Adira snapped. Think of it as a final bonus, a severance package. You go on the trip, you have a lovely time in the sun, you let him have his little hero moment. It's a clean break. You get a vacation and he gets to feel like he did something good before the end. It's kinder this way, really. Kind. The word was a slap in the face. Xavier felt a wave of nausea. And the money? Jordana asked. Her voice was stronger now, the guilt seemingly evaporating as the conversation turned to finances. This was the part that made Xavier's ears ring with a strange, high-pitched silence. I told you, my lawyer, who, by the way, bills at $750 an hour and is worth every penny, looked at the standard travel insurance policies, Adira said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial, instructional tone. You let him know it's over the Monday you get back. File the papers Tuesday. The key is to have the divorce filing dated within 48 hours of your return. You claim the emotional distress of the impending divorce made it impossible for you to have known the trip could proceed. It's a standard clause. Tell him after the trip, cancellation insurance pays. The refund for the trip, which has to be at least $7 or $8 grand if he did what you said he was planning, will be processed. Since you'll be the one initiating the claim post-separation, the funds will be directed to you. Xavier's mind raced, connecting the dots with the cold, terrifying precision of an electrical circuit diagram. The surprise, the insurance, the refund. It wasn't a vacation. It was a heist. They were planning to steal his grand gesture, his 18 months of overtime, his $8,450, and leave him with nothing but a broken heart and a pile of legal bills. He looked down at the white envelope in his hand. The paper felt hot, radioactive. The beautiful calligraphy spelling out Costa Rica seemed to mock him. Are you sure? Jordana asked, a final note of doubt. I am 100% sure, Adira said with chilling finality. Now stop whining, put on a smile, let him give you his big surprise and act grateful. You can cry on a beach in Costa Rica. It's much more glamorous. Now I have to go. Gregory is taking me to Scalo. The bill will be at least $300. This is the life you should have, sister. Just follow the plan. The call ended. The silence that followed was immense, heavier than any sound. Xavier stood motionless in the dark hallway for a full minute, then two. The warmth he had felt just minutes before was gone, replaced by a profound Arctic cold. He didn't feel anger. Not yet. That would come later. What he felt was a strange, terrifying calm, a clarity. He was a man who understood systems. He saw the flow of energy, the points of connection, the load-bearing walls. And in that moment, he saw the entire, rotten architecture of his marriage for what it was. And he saw exactly which wire to cut to make the whole thing collapse. He slowly, deliberately, slid the envelope back into the inside pocket of his jacket. The surprise wasn't over. It had just changed direction. The next morning was Saturday. The sun rose over the Sandia Mountains at 6:47 a.m., casting long shadows across the neat lawns of their neighborhood. Xavier was already awake. He had not slept. He had spent the night on the hated floral love seat, the one that cost $900 to reupholster, staring into the darkness while the architecture of his new reality settled into place. He felt like one of his own installations after a hailstorm, outwardly intact, but shattered on a microscopic level. When he heard Jordana begin to stir in the bedroom, he moved into the kitchen. He pulled the carton of eggs, $4.29 for a dozen, from the refrigerator. He took out the block of Tillamook cheddar, $6.99. He chopped an onion with steady, precise movements on the wooden cutting board. He was making breakfast just like he did every Saturday. This was the first brick in his new wall of deception. He had to be normal. He had to be the same old Xavier, the steady, predictable husband she thought she could play for a fool. Jordana entered the kitchen, wrapped in her $150 silk robe, a gift from Adira. She yawned, stretching her arms over her head. "Morning, babe. You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," he said, his voice even. He didn't turn from the stove, where the onions were sizzling in a pat of butter. "Just thinking about some things for work." It was the perfect lie, plausible and boring. "Don't work too hard," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee from the $40 Mr. Coffee machine. She came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her chin on his shoulder. Her touch felt alien, a violation. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to pull away, but he forced himself to remain still. He could feel the cold, calculating mind behind the warm skin. "What are you making?" "Just some scrambled eggs," he said. "Your favorite with lots of cheese." "Yum." She squeezed him, then released him, and moved to the dining table, their refinished $75 thrift store table. She picked up her phone and began scrolling, her face illuminated by the screen's blue light. He knew she was probably texting Adira. He's acting totally normal. The plan is safe. He dished the eggs onto 2 plates, the same $8 plates from Target they'd had for years. He placed her plate in front of her. "Eat up." "Thanks, honey," she said, her eyes not leaving her phone. He sat opposite her, a gulf of unspoken truth wider than the 36 inches of oak between them. He watched her eat the eggs he had made. He had seasoned them with salt, pepper, and a silent, burning rage. Each bite she took was a performance of normalcy, and he matched her, lifting his own fork, chewing, swallowing. He was playing a role now, the loving husband, and he would play it with an unnerving, methodical perfection until the time was right. He had to keep her comfortable. He had to keep her unsuspecting. Her greed and arrogance were now his greatest assets. He would let her believe she was in control right up until the moment he took everything away. The eggs tasted like ash in his mouth, but he smiled at her when she finally looked up from her phone. "Good, right?" She smiled back, a brilliant false smile. "The best?" The weekend was a masterclass in feigned ignorance. On Saturday afternoon, Jordana suggested they go look at cars. "Adira's husband just got her the new BMW X5, she said casually. as they drove in Xavier's F-150, the one that starts at $65,000. It's gorgeous. It has this huge panoramic sunroof. The old Xavier would have felt a familiar pang of inadequacy. The new Xavier simply nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. Is that right? They went to the BMW dealership on Pan American Freeway. A salesman in a suit that probably cost more than Xavier's tool collection descended upon them. Jordana gravitated immediately toward a white BMW 3 Series sedan. The sticker in the window read $43,850. She ran her hand along the hood. Oh, X, isn't she a dream? It's a nice car, he said, his tone deliberately neutral. He could see the fantasy playing out in her eyes, driving this car away from their sad little house, away from him, on her way to the life Adira promised her. The salesman, sensing a potential commission, was effusive. This is our most popular model. We could get you in this for around $800 a month, with a good down payment. Jordana looked at Xavier, her eyes wide with manufactured hope. Could we, X? Could we ever afford something like this? It was a test. She was probing his financial boundaries, his ambitions. He knew the answer she wanted was a frustrated sigh, a defeated, "No, honey, we can't." That would reinforce her narrative of him as a man holding her back. He refused to give it to her. Instead, he looked at the sticker price, then at her. He gave a thoughtful, considered nod. You know, maybe, he said, letting the word hang in the air. I've been thinking about new revenue streams, expanding the business. There are possibilities. Her carefully constructed expression faltered for a second. This was not in the script. He was supposed to be the guy who fixed things, not the guy who envisioned possibilities. He saw a flicker of confusion, and it was deeply, grimly satisfying. He had just introduced a variable she hadn't accounted for. Really? She said, recovering quickly. Like what? Just ideas, he said, clapping his hand on the hood of the $43,850 car. Let's go. I'm getting hungry. He walked away, leaving her standing by the car, a pensive look on her face. He had planted a seed of doubt, not about his love, but about her assessment of his limits. On Sunday evening, she brought up the anniversary. They were on the couch, watching some reality show about wealthy people arguing on a yacht. Our anniversary is next week, she said, snuggling up to him. 10 years. Can you believe it? Time flies, he said, his arm a dead weight around her shoulders. Have you thought about it? What we should do? She asked, her voice a careful blend of nonchalance and expectation. This was it. The moment she expected the surprise. The moment he was supposed to present the tickets. He could feel the envelope in his jacket, still tucked in the inside pocket. It felt like a block of ice. He turned to her and smiled a slow, sad smile. I have, babe. I've thought about it a lot. He paused, letting the silence build. And I think, with things being a little tight right now, maybe we should just have a quiet dinner at home. I'll cook your favorite. We can save the money for, a down payment on a car, maybe. He watched her face as his words registered. He saw the flash of disappointment, so quick he might have missed it if he weren't looking for it. It was followed by a flicker of annoyance, and then, finally, a mask of loving understanding was snapped into place. Oh, she said. Of course, honey, that's a really smart, responsible idea. You're always so practical. She said practical, like it was a terminal illness. I just want to build a secure future for us, he said, using the kind of line she would expect from the man she thought he was. I know you do, she whispered, leaning her head on his chest. He could hear the lie in her voice. and she could not hear the silent, furious ticking of the clock in his. She thought she was managing a simpleton. She had no idea she was dealing with a man who had just armed a bomb and was calmly waiting for the perfect moment to walk away. Is Xavier's playing dumb strategy the right move, or should he have confronted her immediately? Let us know what you would do in this situation in the comments. The buildup is almost over, and what comes next will change everything. Monday morning at 7:15 a.m., Xavier called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. He told his supervisor, Mike, that he had a stomach bug, a lie that felt insignificant compared to the ones he was living. His real appointment was at 9 a.m. in a glass tower downtown. He had spent Sunday night online, not watching television, but researching the best divorce attorneys in Albuquerque. He wasn't looking for the most expensive or the most aggressive. He was looking for the smartest. He found her on the third page of his search. A woman named Evelyn Reed, whose website was sparse and professional. Her specialty was forensic divorce, a term that appealed to Xavier's methodical nature. Her reviews mentioned her calm demeanor and her ruthless attention to detail. Her fee was listed at $350 per hour. He put on his one good suit, a dark gray $400 suit he'd bought for a wedding 5 years ago. It felt stiff and formal, the uniform of a life he didn't recognize. He drove his F-150 not to the Solar Now warehouse in the industrial park, but to the underground parking garage on 4th Street, paying the $8 fee with his personal debit card. Evelyn Reed's office was on the 12th floor. It wasn't opulent like he'd imagined a lawyer's office to be. It was functional, with clean lines and a stunning view of the West Mesa. The walls were adorned not with expensive art, but with framed building permits and zoning maps. This was a woman who understood structure. Evelyn was a sharp, composed black woman in her 50s, her hair in a silver-streaked afro that commanded respect. She didn't offer platitudes or sympathetic noises. She offered him a bottle of water and got straight to business. "Mister," she said, looking at his intake form, "it says here your name is Xavier. You're 37. You've been married for 10 years. No children. You believe your wife is planning to defraud you. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning, and do not leave out a single detail." And so he did. He spoke for 45 minutes without interruption. He laid it all out with the precision of a man explaining a wiring diagram. He told her about their life, the modest income, Jordana's aspirational spending. He described his job, the overtime, the 18 months of saving. He detailed the $8,450 Costa Rica trip, quoting the exact price from memory. He recounted the phone call he overheard, word for word. He repeated Adira's chilling phrase, "Tell him after the trip, cancellation insurance pays." He explained the scheme as he understood it. The trip, the divorce filing, the insurance claim. When he finished, he placed a small, neat stack of papers on her polished desk. "This is the confirmation for the trip," he said, pointing to the first document. "It shows the total cost and the travel insurance I purchased for an additional $512. He then pushed a credit card statement forward. "This is my Capital One statement. As you can see, the charge for the trip was made on this card, from an account solely in my name. She is not an authorized user. The account was opened before we were married." Finally, he pushed forward a printout of their joint checking account. "This shows our typical monthly balance. Nowhere near enough to cover such an expense. It proves I paid for it with separate funds I earned." Evelyn Reed was silent for a long time. She read through each document, her eyes sharp and focused. She tapped the credit card statement with a perfectly manicured finger. "This," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "is the key. The refund will follow the path of the original transaction. It will be credited back to this card and this card only. Her sisters $750 an hour lawyer is either an idiot or doesn't exist. She looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw something other than professional detachment in her eyes. It was a flicker of admiration. "They underestimated you," she said. "They saw a man who works with his hands and assumed he doesn't have a mind for details. This is a common and often fatal mistake." "So what do I do?" Xavier asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You do nothing yet," Evelyn said, leaning forward. "You continue to play the part of the disappointed but practical husband. You let her believe the trip is off. You let her stew in her own greed. We need her to stay complacent until we are ready to move." She picked up a pen. "Tomorrow is Tuesday. Here is what is going to happen. At 9 a.m., you will call the travel agency and cancel the trip. You will get a confirmation of cancellation and the pending refund in writing via email. You will forward that email to me the moment you receive it. While you are doing that, I will be filing this." She held up a blank petition for dissolution of marriage. "I will have a process server waiting at your sister-in-law's condo in Nob Hill. He will serve your wife with the papers at precisely 10:30 a.m. We will request an emergency hearing to freeze all joint assets, citing a credible threat of financial malfeasance, for which you have provided ample evidence." She laid out the plan with the calm certainty of a general before a battle. Every contingency was covered. Every detail was precise. The cost of the filing would be $137. The process server would be $85. Her retainer for 10 hours of work was $3,500. Xavier wrote the check from his personal savings without hesitation. It was the best money he had ever spent. He walked out of the glass tower and into the bright Albuquerque sunlight. The air felt different, cleaner. For the first time since he had heard that phone call, he felt a sense of control. The dread had been replaced by a cold, hard sense of purpose. He was no longer a victim in their story. He was the architect of their consequences. The game was on, and he was finally holding all the cards. Tuesday morning, the day of the strike. Xavier woke up at 5:30 a.m., the same time he always did on a workday. The sky outside was a deep, pre-dawn purple. Jordana was still asleep beside him, her breathing slow and even. For a moment, in the dim light, she looked like the woman he had married 10 years ago, the woman who had laughed with him as they painted their first apartment, the woman who had cried with joy when he'd proposed. A wave of grief, sharp and unexpected, washed over him. He wasn't just ending a marriage, he was mourning a dream. But then he remembered the sound of Adira's voice on the phone. "Tell him after the trip, cancellation insurance pays." And the grief receded, replaced by a steely resolve. The woman in his bed was a stranger, an actress playing a part. The show was about to be canceled. He got up, showered, and dressed in his work clothes, heavy-duty jeans, steel-toed boots, and a clean Solar Now polo shirt. The uniform felt like armor. He made coffee, the aroma filling the silent house. He did not make breakfast. At 7 a.m., he left a note on the counter. "Called in for an early job. See you tonight. Love, X." The "Love, X" felt like a final, bitter lie. Instead of driving to the warehouse, he drove to a small park a few blocks from their house. He sat in his truck, the engine off, and watched the clock on his dashboard. 8:58 a.m., 8:59 a.m. He took a deep breath. At precisely 9 a.m., he dialed the number for the travel agency. "Sunquest Vacations, this is Brenda. How can I help you?" The voice was cheerful and professional. "Hello, Brenda," Xavier said, his own voice calm and measured. "My name is Xavier. I need to cancel a trip. The confirmation number is 774-B-91. There was a moment of typing. "Okay, I have it here." A trip for 2 to Costa Rica departing next Friday. Is everything all right? Change of plans, Xavier said simply. He didn't offer any more explanation. He didn't owe this stranger his story. I see. Well, you did purchase the cancel for any reason premium insurance policy. That's very smart. More typing. Okay, so the total cost of the package was $8,450. Per the terms of the policy, you are entitled to a full cash refund minus the cost of the insurance itself, which was $512. The refund amount will be $7,938. That's correct, Xavier said, and that refund will be credited back to the original form of payment, a Capital One Visa card ending in 4281. The refund will be processed today and should appear on your statement within 3 to 5 business days. Is that acceptable? It was more than acceptable. It was justice. Yes, that is perfect. Excellent. I am processing the cancellation now, and it is done. I am sending the official cancellation confirmation to the email address we have on file, x.installer@solarnow.com. You should receive it within the next minute or two. Thank you, Brenda, Xavier said. You've been very helpful. He hung up. A moment later, his phone buzzed. It was the email. He opened it, saw the official letterhead, the confirmation number, the refund amount. He immediately forwarded it to Evelyn Reed with a simple, 2-word message. It is done. His phone buzzed again almost instantly. A reply from Evelyn. Received. I am filing now. The server is on his way. Go to work. Act normal. Do not answer any calls from her or her sister. We will speak this evening. Xavier started the engine of his F-150. For the first time in days, he felt like he could breathe again. He drove to the Solar Now warehouse, the familiar route a comfort. He spent the morning on a roof in Rio Rancho, the sun hot on his back, the physical labor a welcome distraction. He was part of a team, installing a 12-kilowatt system on a new custom home. The work was honest and straightforward. You connect point A to point B. You respect the power you're dealing with. You make sure the foundation is secure. It was everything his marriage was not. Meanwhile, across town, the consequences were beginning to cascade. At 10:28 a.m., a man in a nondescript sedan parked on a side street near Adira's upscale Nob Hill condo building. He was a licensed process server named Frank, a retired cop with 20 years of experience. He had a photograph of Jordana and a set of legal documents in a manila envelope. At 10:31 a.m., Jordana and Adira emerged from the building's polished glass doors. They were laughing, dressed in expensive athletic wear, on their way to a $35 per-class yoga session. Jordana was holding a designer water bottle that probably cost $50. Frank approached them calmly. "Jordana?" he asked. Jordana stopped, a flicker of annoyance on her face at being approached by a stranger. "Yes?" "This is for you," Frank said, and handed her the envelope. "What is this?" she asked, taking it. "You've been served," Frank said, already turning and walking away. Jordana tore open the envelope. Adira peered over her shoulder. Their laughter died on the pristine Nob Hill sidewalk. Jordana's face went white. The color drained from her cheeks as she scanned the first page of the petition for dissolution of marriage. She saw Xavier's name as the petitioner. She saw her name as the respondent. She saw the date. Today. What the hell is this? Adira snatched the papers from her sister's trembling hands. Her sharp, legal-adjacent mind scanned the document much faster. She saw the phrases, irretrievable breakdown, financial malfeasance, misappropriation of marital assets. Her eyes widened in disbelief and fury. "He knows," Jordana whispered, her voice a thread of sound. The $50 water bottle slipped from her grasp and clattered on the pavement. "Oh my God, Adira, he knows." "How could he possibly know?" Adira hissed, her face a mask of rage. He's not smart enough to know. She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. Call him. Call him right now. Jordana fumbled for her own phone, her hands shaking so badly she could barely unlock it. She dialed Xavier's number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. He's not answering, she cried, panic rising in her voice. Then I'll call him, Adira snarled, dialing. Straight to voicemail. The coward, he's hiding. She looked at the papers again, her eyes narrowing. Wait a minute. This lawyer, Evelyn Reed? I've heard of her. She's serious. Oh, you are in so much trouble. The U was pointed and accusatory. The alliance was already beginning to fracture. Me? You're the one who came up with the plan, Jordana shrieked, the sound high and hysterical. People walking their dogs were starting to stare. I came up with a plan for a competent person, Adira shot back. You must have said something. You must have tipped him off. They stood there on the sun-drenched sidewalk, surrounded by the trappings of the life they aspired to, their ugly conspiracy laid bare on a few sheets of legal paper. The yoga class was forgotten. The laughter was gone. The coordinated strike had hit its target with devastating precision. The world they had tried to build on a foundation of lies and greed was collapsing in real time. And all Xavier had to do was keep working, letting the sun and the law do their jobs. The aftermath was not a single explosion, but a series of controlled demolitions, each one dismantling a part of the life Jordana had taken for granted. The consequences cascaded, swift and merciless, all tracked through the cold, impartial medium of emails, bank statements, and legal notices. The first consequence was the money. On Thursday, 3 days after the cancellation, Xavier checked his Capital One account online. There it was, a pending credit of $7,938. The severance package, as Adira had called it, had been safely returned to its rightful owner. Jordana and Adira, meanwhile, discovered this reality the hard way. Adira, in a fit of arrogant pique, had her $750 an hour lawyer, who turned out to be a junior associate at her husband's firm working pro bono as a favor, fire off a demand letter to the travel insurance company. The response they received a week later was a masterwork of corporate indifference. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that per Section 12, Betrayal, Paragraph C of the policy agreement, all refunds are made to the original purchaser via the original method of payment. Case closed. The $7,938 was Xavier's, untouchable. The second consequence was the house. Adira had assured Jordana that, in a community property state like New Mexico, she would be entitled to half the value of the home. She was wrong. Evelyn Reed, in her initial filing, had also included a copy of a document Jordana had forgotten she ever signed. 10 years ago, when Xavier's father had given them $20,000 for the down payment on their $220,000 home, he had insisted on a simple legal agreement. It wasn't a full prenuptial agreement, but a specific contract stating that his $20,000 gift was intended for his son, and should the marriage dissolve, the initial equity provided by that gift, plus a proportional share of the home's appreciation, would revert solely to Xavier. Jordana had signed it without a second thought, laughing it off as a silly formality. Now that silly formality was a legally binding contract. Evelyn Reed argued successfully that this document, combined with Jordana's demonstrable bad faith and attempted fraud, voided her claim to the marital home. The court agreed. Jordana was given 30 days to vacate the property. Her share of the marital assets would amount to half of their joint checking account, a grand total of $2,341.50, and her own personal belongings. The third consequence was social. Adira had always moved through her wealthy social circle with an air of unimpeachable authority. The story of her sister's divorce, as she initially told it, was one of tragedy. Her poor, gentle sister had been callously abandoned by a brutish, ungrateful husband. This narrative held for about 2 weeks until Evelyn Reed made a strategic move. In a response to a motion filed by Jordana's lawyer, Evelyn attached an appendix. It was a full transcript of the text messages between Jordana and Adira from the weekend Xavier was playing dumb. Evelyn had subpoenaed them from the phone company. The texts were damning. Jordana, he's taking me to look at BMWs like he could ever afford it. LOL. Adira, play along. Let the poor man dream. The bigger his dream, the bigger your payout. Jordana, he said no to the trip. Said we should save for a car. He's so predictable. Adira, perfect. He's making it easy for you. He's establishing a pattern of fiscal prudence. The judge will love it when you testify he suddenly became reckless after the divorce filing. Stick to the plan. Evelyn Reed knew that court filings are public records. She also knew that Adira's husband was a partner at a prominent Albuquerque law firm. She leaked the filing, including the appendix, to a legal blog popular with the city's attorneys. Within 48 hours, the story was everywhere. Adira was no longer the sophisticated socialite. She was a co-conspirator in a petty, failed scam. Her husband was humiliated. Invitations to charity galas and exclusive dinner parties suddenly dried up. The whispers followed her through the aisles of Whole Foods. Her carefully curated world of status and influence had been shattered by her own words, immortalized in a court document. The fourth consequence was the series of voicemails Xavier received in the 48 hours after Jordana was served. He had followed Evelyn's instructions and let them all go to his inbox, a digital record of a complete emotional collapse. Voicemail 1, Jordana, 10:45 a.m. Tuesday. Xavier, call me. There's been a huge mistake. Call me right now. Tone, confused, angry. Voicemail 2, Adira, 10:52 a.m. Tuesday. You pathetic coward. You think you can get away with this? You have no idea who you're messing with. You will regret this. Tone, threatening, snarling. Voicemail 3, Jordana, 2:17 p.m. Tuesday. Okay, fine, I get it. You're mad. But filing for divorce? Isn't that a little extreme? We can talk about this. I know I haven't been perfect, but we can fix this. Tone, bargaining, manipulative. Voicemail 4, Jordana, 9 p.m. Tuesday. I'm at Adira's. I can't go home. You changed the code on the garage door? Seriously? Xavier, please, I have nowhere to go. Tone, panicked, pleading. Voicemail 5, Jordana, 8:30 a.m. Wednesday. Sound of crying. How could you do this to us? 10 years? You're just throwing away 10 years? I loved you. I still love you. Tone, hysterical, weeping. Voicemail Xeers, Adira, 11 a.m. Wednesday. Listen to me very carefully. My lawyer says you have committed a gross violation of privacy. We are going to sue you for everything you have. That $60,000 salary won't even cover our legal fees. Tone, desperate, bluffing. Xavier saved every single one. They were the soundtrack to his liberation. Each message was another nail in the coffin of the life they had tried to steal from him. The downfall was total, public, and most satisfyingly of all, entirely of their own making. What do you believe is the most satisfying consequence Jordana and Adira faced? The financial loss, the loss of the house, or the public humiliation? Let's talk about it in the comments. The story is almost at its end, but the most important part, Xavier's new beginning, is just about to start. 6 months later, the air was warm and thick with the scent of salt water and hibiscus. Xavier sat on a simple wooden stool at a small, open-air soda, a local eatery on a dusty side road miles from the tourist-packed beaches of Tamarindo, Costa Rica. In front of him was a plate of gallo pinto, fried eggs, and sweet plantains. The entire meal, including a bottle of ice-cold imperial beer, cost him 3,500 colones, about $6. The sun, the same sun he worked under every day, felt different here. It felt less like a challenge, and more like a blessing. He had rebooked the trip, the exact same eco-lodge, the same dates, but for one person instead of two. The cost was significantly less, leaving him with over $3,000 of the refunded money. He didn't stay at the all-inclusive resort section this time. He had opted for a small private cabina set back in the jungle, a simple room with a ceiling fan, a mosquito net, and a hammock on the porch. He spent his days hiking, learning the names of the howler monkeys and toucans, and reading books he'd bought at a used bookstore in Albuquerque. He was alone, but he was not lonely. The silence was not empty. It was full of peace. His house was quiet now, but it was a good quiet. The hated floral love seat was gone, donated to a charity. The space it occupied was now home to a sturdy bookshelf he had built himself, filled with books on solar engineering, New Mexican history, and Latin American fiction. He had repainted the living room, not a trendy gray, but a warm, earthy adobe color that reminded him of the soil. The house was no longer a stage for a performance of marriage. It was his sanctuary, a space that reflected him and him alone. His life had recalibrated around a new center of gravity, his own worth. The change was most visible at work. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, the owner of Solar Now, a man named Dave who had started the company out of his garage 30 years ago, called Xavier into his office. "Xavier," Dave had said, getting right to the point, "I'm looking to step back. I want to spend more time with my grandkids. I need someone to run the residential installation division, someone who knows the work inside and out, who the crews respect, and who I can trust not to screw things up." He had offered Xavier the promotion to Director of Residential Operations. It came with a new salary of $95,000 a year, a company truck, and a corner office with a window. The old Xavier might have been intimidated, might have doubted his own qualifications. The new Xavier simply nodded. "I accept," he said. "On one condition." "What's that?" Dave asked, surprised. "The 4 guys on my crew, Luis, Marco, Carlos, and Ben, they're the best installers in the state. They're all making under $22 an hour. I want to give each of them an immediate raise of $2.50 an hour. Their hard work is what makes this company profitable. We need to value that." Dave had looked at him for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across his face. "Done," he said, shaking Xavier's hand. "I knew I picked the right guy." Xavier pulled his phone from his pocket, shielding the screen from the bright Costa Rican sun. He had a new text message. It was a picture from Luis. It showed the 4 of them on a roof, grinning, giving a thumbs up to the camera. The text read, "Hope you're having a good time, boss. Thanks again for everything. First round is on us when you get back." Xavier smiled, a real, unforced smile that reached his eyes. He typed back a simple reply. "You earned it. See you next week." He took a sip of his beer and looked out at the lush green landscape. He thought about Jordana and Adira. He had heard through the grapevine that Jordana was living in a cramped, 1-bedroom apartment in the far northeast Heights, working full-time at the dental office. Adira's husband had filed for divorce, citing the public humiliation from her scheme as the final straw. Their worlds had shrunk, impoverished by their own greed. His world, however, had expanded in ways he never could have imagined. He hadn't set out for revenge. He had only wanted accountability. He had wanted the consequences of their actions to land where they belonged. The rest, the promotion, the peace, this perfect moment in the sun, was just a bonus. True wealth, he realized, wasn't about the price of a car or the label on a dress. It wasn't something you could steal or scheme your way into. It was the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. It was the loyalty of the people you stood by. And who stood by you? It was the freedom to sit alone at a $6 lunch and feel like the richest man in the world. We believe that true strength isn't about avoiding hurt, but about how you rebuild after you've been broken. Xavier's journey from betrayal to self-reclamation is a testament to the power of integrity and quiet strength. If his story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to Love Beyond Pride for more stories of resilience, justice, and the discovery of true worth. Thank you for being with us on this journey.